Good afternoon. Oh, excuse me, that's a good start. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream where we are going to be looking at one of the new features in Capture One 23, which is smart adjustment. So hopefully, as someone commented, you'll all be a lot smarter by the end of this session. Now, it's not going to be an hour. I imagine it will probably only take us about 35 minutes because it's a pretty simple concept. There's a few different things we're going to cover, obviously how to use the tool, how to combine it with the style, and more importantly, when it doesn't make sense to use it, because like any tool, right tool for the right job. So just because it's there doesn't mean you have to use it all the time. So we will make sure we make the right choices of when to use this. For those of you on YouTube and Facebook, welcome. If you have a question, please pop that into the comments because I will see those. That will come straight through to me. If you're hanging out in our webinar room, then tip for you, if you want to ask a question, put it in the Q&A tab because that just helps keep it separate from the chat. And if you want to hide that section, you can click that down arrow and that will give you a bit more space on screen as well for Capture One. But wherever you are, don't forget to ask a question. Okay, so let's get straight to it. So what is the point of smart adjustments? So smart adjustments is to deal with a situation where you want to copy and apply adjustments from a target photo, from a reference photo to a target, but all the numerical values won't be the same. So normally when we copy paste, it's because we've got a sequence of identical pictures and we want the same values on each of those pictures. That's fine if your situational environment doesn't change. But if your lighting's shifting a little bit, if you're moving around, if you're reframing, then you can't necessarily guarantee that the adjustments are going to be the same on every single picture. So let's take, excuse me, this one as an example. So this was shot as part of our iPad campaign by Svein. And we've got the gentleman in the cafe, the light's changing a little bit. You can see he's in slightly different positions. We've got this photo, which I've thrown in as a curveball to be a bit more interesting, because there's also our subject, but there's also some background people. And the reason why I've put this one in is because currently smart adjustments rely on facial recognition. So within Capture One, there is some facial recognition going on, some pretty good facial recognition that seeks out faces in every single photo that you're going to use this tool with, and then seeks to normalize the exposure and white balance across a sequence of pictures. Not just simply copying numerical values, but by comparing face to face in each of those pictures. So how does it work? So let's take our reference picture. And interestingly, I hadn't spotted this. I only spotted it this morning when I was looking at these pictures, but we've got, oh, as usual, I forgot to turn on my mouse locator. But if you notice, the first three in the sequence are from Nikon, and we can verify that. I just haven't changed the file name. That would be funny, wouldn't it? Just to trick you. You can see this is from a Nikon D850. If we look on the metadata, and these three shots are from a Canon EOS R3. So to use this feature, you don't have to have the same camera, the same sensor or whatever. And we're showing here it's working across two different cameras, purely by accident. So let's take our reference picture. I am going to adjust this to the exposure and white balance that I'm happy with. It's completely reset, so this is how it came out of the camera. So I feel it's a little bit underexposed. So let's bump up our exposure by a small amount. I'm going to go to there, and white balance wise, I'm going to grab our white balance picker and pick off this coffee cup here. Maybe that's a bit cold, so let's warm it up a bit. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now I could do some other adjustments as well, but for the sake of clarity of how this works, we'll leave that to the next demonstration. So I've only done exposure and white balance currently. So what we need to do is find your Smart Adjustments tool. Now, if you're running in the default workspace in Capture One, you will find that in the Adjustments tool tab. Now, I've customized my workspace, as you may or may not notice, which is something I would recommend all of you do who's using Capture One. No two people are really going to use it in the same way. We all have different needs, different priorities. So if you don't shoot tethered, get rid of that entire tool tab which is related to tethered capture. If you're using a tool more regularly, which is kind of buried in the interface, bring it to the surface. And the important step is, once you've been customizing, of course, is to always save your workspace. Now, if you've recently upgraded and are mad at us because we've reset your workspace, we tend to do that. So to show you where the new tools are, a backup of your workspace is always shown in this list. So you can see backup from Capture One 22, and then I've got my own workspaces, which you can see are evolving as well, because we always find new ways to get a bit quicker. Avraham asked, good question, is facial recognition going to be added as a catalog sorting feature as it's already baked in? Well, this is just the beginning, really, for AI tools and for things like this. So technically anything is possible, but like any additional feature, of course, it's based on demand and other factors as well. But hey, that's a great suggestion. Okay, so if you don't see your Smart Adjustments tool, remember you can right click on any tool tab and add the tool. You'll find it at the bottom under S there, Smart Adjustments. So we've set our exposure and white balance. I am now going to set this as a reference. So this is my reference that Capture One is working off. Now I'm going to go in, let's just hide my viewer. Let's select all of these pictures. So that's 5 pictures. It of course works on a batch. And we're going to apply this to these 5 pictures and watch what happens. Now pretty quickly, all of those shots will be adjusted. Now looking at them, you can see they all land quite nicely. Forget what the values are doing. We'll look at that in a second. But in terms of a sequence, a story of exposure and white balance, they all fit quite nicely. Now, if you multiply the number of pictures I've done here from 5, to 50, then that's going to start to save you significant amounts of time, because without this feature, and if we turn on before and after, you can see that's the befores and afters. I would probably treat these two in a similar way because they're shot, almost in an identical angle. This one and this one are close, but not the same. So I'd have to edit those two separately. And finally, this one is completely different from all the others. So I've got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 different edits to do on all these pictures. Certainly if I just want to balance up exposure and white balance. But now we can see that's actually a pretty remarkable job. Now what happened with this one, because there is a few faces for Capture One to choose from. So if we look at, if we imagine this, Capture One would have found this. I actually checked this earlier by looking at a special sneaky R&D mode to see where Capture One has identified faces, and it did correctly identify the 3 faces that are in this photo. Even though it's a side profile, we can still pick it out. But there's a difference between these 3. So in terms of size or pixel dimensions, this face is slightly more prominent. So you can see it's a little bit bigger top to bottom. And it's also sharper. So by examining this picture, the AI is going to determine, okay, this is the face that I should probably be working with. Now, if we had 12 people in a group, and they're all perfectly in focus and they're all relatively the same size, then a mean average will be taken across those faces in terms of exposure and white balance. But in this situation, this guy is going to get the priority. So I hope that makes sense. It doesn't. So as I pointed out, we've got a couple of NEFs, couple of CR3, really no issue whatsoever. Doesn't matter what the raw data is, because the facial recognition is looking at the exposure and white balance of the faces and normalizing that. So it's kind of irrelevant what the raw file is. And as we hope to normalize anyway with camera profiling to some extent, then it's really not an issue. And as Matthew says, hi Product Manager Matthew, it does not affect the process. This tool does not care about the format of the file. It cares about getting the results right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Just check if there's any questions over here. Peter's asking, how is exposure defined with a smart adjustment? Literally the exposure slider or the exposure as a result of exposure, blacks, whites, and potentially even levels. So this was our reference. So we can see over here. So the exposure value, I guess if we can say that, is based off my reference. So capture one is obviously determined facial recognition here. This is what I'm using as my reference. When I apply this to other pictures, I will try to do my best, if you like, because any AI is doing its best, and match the result across the rest of those pictures. Right now, what capture one will adjust, if we look at the values, is exposure and white balance. So you can see if I go across these various different pictures, just have a look at the white balance and exposures. So we've got our white balance there, that's 0.74, that's what I adjusted manually for exposure. Then we've got 0.3, we've got 1.5 almost, just under a stop, a bit more under a stop. See, I said these two are similar, but they're not identical. But you see the white balance is almost the same. And then finally, this one, 1.7 stops. So there's no way a normal copy and apply would cope with a sequence of pictures like this. Okay, what's next? Let's just check for any other things. It'd be great if you could add Polish subtitles. You know what, I thought I enabled that. Check if you can hit the auto button and it should auto translate. Be interesting if it works actually, because that's something I actually enabled for these. So what else can we do? We can combine it with a style, which actually makes everything even more powerful. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to pick a different collection of pictures. By the way, I need to say thanks to the photographer. So you can see her name there, Jerry. Hi Jerry, if you're watching, Jerry Jalmer. She gave me a whole bunch of these different pictures because she shoots a lot of environmental portraiture, also some editorial work. So this is, you know, an ideal demonstration for this kind of feature. So thanks Jerry for doing that. I will put your name in the description as well if you want to give Jerry a thank you and a follow yourself. So let's make sure this is reset. It is. I'm going to hit this with a style. So let's go Nordic editorial and let's try Copenhagen 3's maybe a bit contrasty. Let's go for Copenhagen 2. So I've put a style on this one picture because I'm going to create myself a smart style. So let's go ahead and make a couple of other adjustments. So I'm going to take the exposure down just a tiny bit, not much, just a little tweak in the exposure, and white balance wise, let's make it a bit cooler for this series of pictures. Okay, so I've got my style applied. You can see the sliders obviously have moved around, and I've tweaked the exposure and white balance. So going back to our Smart Adjustments tool, I'm going to set that as my reference. And now I'm going to save this as a style. So I've got a combination of the Copenhagen 2 style, so that's one of our styles, linked to a Smart Adjustment for this face and situation and so on. So let's actually go ahead and save that as a style. So when we hit Save Style, you'll get the Save Style dialog, and you'll note the first entry is for Smart Adjustments. So we've got Smart White Balance, Smart Exposure. By default, you can see that the normal exposure and normal white balance is turned off because this is a smart style. So let's go ahead and save that, and I'm going to put it in the same spot. So we called it, or we used Copenhagen 2, so let's call it Copenhagen 2 Smart, like so. So now we've got smart style. I'm going to reset this one so we can apply it to a whole bunch of pictures. So let's grab that one. We grab that one as that's a little bit darker. We take this one as she's smaller in there. Let's take that one as that's dramatically different lighting and a situation. Let's go for that one too. And why not this one? We could do the whole lot, but I want you to see them all on screen. So I've selected 6 different photos. And if I go back to my styles tool, Nordic editorial, you can see my Copenhagen 2 Smart. So first of all, let's apply normal style. So let's go for Copenhagen 2. So you'll see if I apply Copenhagen 2, it looks pretty good. You know, it's got the look of the style, but I've got a bit of extra work to do on some of those shots. So this one is probably a little bit too bright. It's just not super consistent. Maybe this one's a bit dark and so on. So what happens if I hit it with the Smart Style, like so? So now that's got the Smart Style applied across all those shots. And again, if we look at before and after, looks pretty nice and consistent. Now, the only thing I'd say out of this sequence, I probably want to make this one a little bit brighter. And that's an important thing to point out with any kind of tool like this. Do you get 100% success rate? No. Do you get a very high success rate? Yes. Based on some research, analytics, testing that we've done, we reckon at least 80% smart adjustments gets right. So you're getting 80% of the way. So again, I'm only showing you on 6 pictures, but if we multiplied that, by 10, by 100, then exponentially, of course, the time saved is going to go up and up. So if I do want to tweak one of these pictures in a sequence, then Speed Edit becomes your friend as well. Now, if you haven't used Speed Edit, I've just realized I've probably exhausted my overhead camera battery. So because I've got to turn it off from this morning. So let's see if it works. It is for the minute, so let's hope it's got enough oomph. If we look at our keyboard shortcuts and we go to Speed Edit keys, these are keys you can use to quickly access a lot of the main adjustments in Capture One. So for example, I said I wanted to bump up the exposure in this one. So looking at my keyboard shortcuts, I can see under Speed Edit, exposure is Q. So if I hold down Q on my keyboard, like so, you'll see exposure pops up underneath all those pictures and the current value for each picture. Now I said I only wanted to adjust this one. So right now that's not super convenient because it's going to adjust 6. But what I can do is turn this guy off, Edit All Selected. It's the same as this function here, Edit All Selected Variants. So think of it of an effect all or only affect the primary, this is known as. The one that I've picked out in my selection is the primary variant. Now if you want to, you can add this button to your toolbar. So I've done that just by right clicking and customizing and dragging Edit Selected here. So if I turn this off and do the same thing again, hold down Q, now you see exposure is only popped up underneath. And what I'm gonna do, and you won't see that on camera because you can't see my pen, but what I'm doing is essentially just clicking and dragging left and right on the picture. So I said I wanted to brighten it a bit, so I can just drag to the right like so. If I wanted to pull the highlights down, I'm just going to press S on my keyboard, sorry, A for highlights, and pull those down like so. So 2 quick edits, that sequence is done and dusted. Let's put it on some other ones and then I'll show you different examples. So let's grab this one, we grab, what else didn't we do? That one, this one. So now we've got these 6, let's hit it with Smart, like so. Job done. If we look at before and after once more, helps if you actually apply it. I did apply it, sorry. Before and after, we can grab this back and forward. And you can see the difference like so. So that's after adjustment, that's before. So some have required a bigger adjustment than others, and those ones are relatively subtle. So if we look at our exposure values and white balance, this one, so that's got very little and that one's got a bit more. Problem. I've done my own thing here. I didn't do a thing, which was to turn this back on. Because if you apply a style, it only does it to the primary selected one, which was this guy here, see? So I did that on purpose so you would realize that. But when you're applying styles to a batch of pictures, you want to make sure this is turned on, okay? So let's do that again. Let's do Copenhagen Smart, click, like so. So now if we turn before and after, that's better. Thought something weird was going on. You can see Copenhagen 2 is applied, so we've got the look of that nice style. And then now if we look at the numerical values, we will see them change a bit. So that's minus 0.1 of a stop. This is 0.38, 0.64, barely no change, 0.23, and then white balance you can see is shifting between each of those. But as a sequence, they look super nice and consistent. So really nice to plug in that smart element into a style. Like that. Nice save, David. Yeah, did it on purpose, of course. Let's have a look at any questions. Vernon said, is there any plan to add in more adjustments to smart adjustment, contrast levels, etc.? Well, this is V1 of the tool, so we're definitely going to look at ways to make it smarter and more useful. And if that includes other tools, then so be it. But yeah, just keep in mind this is the first iteration, and it's going to get better. So definitely watch this space. Let's check over here for the questions as well. So we answered that. James, if I was to remove the lamp in the reference image, can I apply it to the others? Oh, that was from the previous sequence, I think, James. Well, remember, the lamp is going to be completely ignored because it's based on the face. So I think you're talking about, I'm going from memory here, you're talking about this guy. I think that will be completely ignored as part of the reference because it's all based on that facial recognition. So don't worry about extraneous objects like that. Can you create a smart adjustment style that includes adjustments on layers? Yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't do that actually. So if you wanted to, when creating the style, as an example, so we have got, so let's apply, I should have done it at the start actually, because that would have been a cool thing to add. But just as a case in point, if you look at all the styles that we've got here, notice now that some of them say advanced and some are standard. So you should have got an email today. If you've bought one of our previous style packs that we've upgraded, you'll now get the standard version and the advanced version. And what the advanced version does, let's throw in Copenhagen like so. So if I apply Copenhagen at 50%, then you'll see that we've got two different layers. I'll just reset this because it's got the other style. Let's put Copenhagen back on. So you've got the contrast layer and you've got the color layer separately. So if I wanted to have more contrast, I can do so. If I wanted to have less, I could bring it down like so. If I wanted more of the color element of this style, I could add that, or I could take it down. So yes, you could smartenize a layered style as well. So the ability to save layers into a style also is possible. So if I go back to this one here, let's just set that as reference a little bit. So if I set that as a reference and say save style, then you see we've got the layers and the smart white balance and the smart exposure. So now you've got a layered smart style, which is pretty cool. All right. Titus the Drummer. That's a good name. Is there, what do you do for a living? Are there any plan to manually point out the area you want to set as a reference? This would be useful for commercial photography like product or food. That's a really cool idea, actually. I'd say I don't know if it's possible. I can't tell you if that's something we're at, but it's actually a good suggestion as well. Chantel, aha, you have predicted what's happening. Most of the sequences you have used are of the same model. Has there been much testing done on different people with similar skin tones, thinking for event work? Shall we do it now? That would probably be a good thing to do. Because what we can do is apply this on import as well. So I'm going to import a bunch of pictures and we're going to use this style, the Copenhagen Smart Style. Let's close down a few styles here. So we are going to use the Copenhagen Smart Style on import on a totally different set of pictures of a different person in different lighting situations. So let's do that. So we're going to go to import and we're going to pick out these shots. They're just in a separate folder here. So these are the shots, Chantel. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or so. Various different light, different person, different model, different location. White balance and exposure kind of shifting a little bit as well. So we're going to add those to the catalog, and styles we are going to add our Nordic editorial standard, Copenhagen 2 Smart, like so. Now you can, Chantel, just apply the smart style to any different set of pictures. And yes, there has been quite a lot of testing for that, but let's do it on import so you can see how that works as well. So we're going to add these to the catalog, and we're going to say import all. Let's not put them in there. Let's say import all. And then we've got our pictures coming in, which are being smartenized as we speak. Let's just check that that's applied. Yep. So now I'm going to select all of these, and let's just stick them in this collection I made earlier, so we've got easy access to them. So there's all our styles, like so. So they've had the Copenhagen style applied with the smartness attached to it as well. So let's look at the before and after. So this is how they looked off the card, and this is how they looked after adjustment. Now I think what's super interesting here is, of course, we've got the look of Copenhagen 2, but in particular, if we look at these two at the bottom, now they were shot on the same, I assume it's the same grassy background or something, or at least similar kind of stuff. But out of camera, you see the white balance and exposure is quite different. But after applying the smart style on import, these two actually align really nicely. And even so, these three at the top, you know, it makes quite a good story. Again, if I was going to be picky and say, all right, I just want to tweak something, I would probably on this shot turn off my edit all selected. I'll pull my highlights down, and I'll probably just open up the shadows a bit, and then editing done. So that also saves me a whole bunch of time. Now, don't forget you're editing raw files. So if you don't like the result of something, it's very easy to reset it. But with an 80% success rate, there's a good chance that it's going to save you a whole bunch of time as well. What version of Capture One am I using? That is a very good question. I should begin by pointing that out. So this is Capture One 23, which was released last week now. Seems like a long time ago, but probably because I've been using it for a while, but it was out just last week. So if you're not seeing a Smart Adjustments tool, that's why. But yes, I hope that answers your question, because I think you've hit on a good use case there. I was just looking for it again. Let's put this one up. Yeah, for events, exactly. So, you know, I've done my own fair amounts of use on various different things. You know, if we go to this wedding set or whatever, we've got a whole bunch of different shots there. Let's turn on edit all selected and reset all of those. If I very quickly open this one up, I'm gonna brighten that slightly. That's white balance of the dress. Maybe warm you up a bit. Set that as reference. Select all, and then apply. Like so. We've got a pretty nice sequence already sorted. If I turn on before and after, helps if we looking at the picture. Certainly for this shot here, that's before, after. You can see the changes it's making, especially down here. The white balance is off. This one is much darker, like so. So it has enormous time-saving potential. Okay, let's just check on questions. Thanks, Dave. I'm very excited to start utilizing this feature. It's going to cut a lot of my editing time down. That's what we like to hear. Is Capture One 23 compatible with Ventura? Yes, I saw that question pop up a couple of times. And yeah, it is. So it is fully compatible with Ventura. Should you update to Ventura yet? Don't know. The nervous in me says don't do it. Not for Capture One reasons, it works fine for Capture One, but there's a few other things that don't work with it, which are essential to my workflow, so I always hold off a bit. Okay, when should you not use Smart Adjustments? Let's have that discussion. So once again, we've got a sequence of pictures shot in similar conditions, not identical, similar. We've also got a shoe, because this man is a clog maker, so I've thrown a shoe picture in to see if we can fool the AI and see how it responds. So why would I not use Smart Adjustments, or why would I use Smart Adjustments? Well, if we consider a sequence like this, 1, 2, 3, now they are shot almost in identical conditions. If anything, this one's a teeny bit brighter, But traditionally what we would do with this picture or sequence is, okay, I'd look at the first one, I'm going to brighten that up a little bit, open up my shadows, maybe add some contrast, etc. And then I would copy and apply that across. There we go. So a situation where perhaps maybe you don't need smart adjustments. But let's look at these three pictures. So again, shot very close in time to each other, similar situation, slightly different framing, but could I do a copy and apply on this sequence? No, because if I tried to, copy, apply my white balance across, you can see this one is already much warmer than the other two. The exposure is slightly different. So copying and applying isn't necessarily going to help me in this situation. So could I use copy and apply here? Maybe not. Would smart adjustments work quite nicely? Probably. So if I set that as a reference and then say apply, then we actually end up with a pretty nice normalized sequence with that lot. So that's a situation where smart adjustments would be quite nice. However, let's just reset all of those. So if we were doing our traditional copy and apply, we'd have to treat that one as a sequence. Perhaps there's more of them, and then we'd have to treat that one as a sequence. Could we do the whole lot with smart adjustments? Let's try. So using this same reference, did I reset that one? Yeah, so that's reset. So using that same reference, let's just say apply. There we go. So perhaps I could use smart adjustments on this sequence because now we've got a set of pictures that are pretty nicely aligned. We've also got a shoe in the mix, which actually doesn't look too bad as well. So the only thing I'd say for this one, once again, using speed edit, if I hold Q on my keyboard, I'd probably give that a little boost of brightness. Maybe this guy, he's a little bit darker, but otherwise, it's pretty well aligned. So just because there's not a face there doesn't mean you should instantly assume that it doesn't work. Give it a try, because there's no harm in trying. It's a raw file. You're not, damaging it forever or anything like that. It's worth a punt. It might save you some time, especially if, there was other non-facial pictures in this sequence, then it's worth giving it a go. So I would say when not to use smart adjustments, it's basically if you have a situation where all the same numerical values are going to work out fine, just do a copy apply. There would be no benefit to doing a smart adjustment. But in a situation like this where things vary, then it might make more sense. So even for a final edit, like these two are probably a little bit darker than the others. So if I bring this one up, brighten those two a little, then they probably fit better with this one. But I've still saved me a lot of work in the meantime, and smart adjustments works hand in hand with that really nicely. Okay, that's almost it. I'm going to answer a few more questions, and then as promised, that was about 35 minutes. But, to recap, hopefully you can see that don't worry too much about, not everyone's face is in the same position and the same size and the same skin tone or whatever. Don't worry about that too much. Give it a try. It's very simple to set that reference and apply. Smartenizing a style is a great way to accelerate the workflow further, as you saw with this sequence of, not that one, that sequence of shots. And then equally, don't be bashful about trying to use a smart style that was perhaps created on a different skin tone and then works, pretty nice on a sequence like that as well. Remember, when you save your reference, it doesn't have to be white balance and exposure. So in a situation where you've maybe got a more universal smart style, you could always take off white balance if you just want to use a smart style to sort out exposure. So like in an event, our event photographer, Chantel, as an example, you could untick white balance and just have an exposure fix. So if you're shooting people at an event with a whole variety of different skin tones, perhaps the lighting shifting and so on, but you're not willing to trust white balance is going to work, you could just try exposure as well. So there is that possibility. Or if you didn't like what happened with white balance, you could select them all and just reset the white balance if you wanted to. So you could say, okay, well, how does it look? Yeah, actually it's great. I'm not happy. I'm going to reset the white balance for a batch of pictures. So lots of different options for workflow. How does it work with groups? You'll have to watch the recording, Prasad, because we covered that at the beginning. So I'm going to be mean and not tell you. But basically with a group, it's either a mean average of all the faces or the sharpest, biggest face gets priority. Okay, looking over here. Will it work with animal faces? That would be nice, wouldn't it? But no, not currently. So it's based on human face and skin tone. I imagine there could be all kinds of issues if we have different animals with different fur color. But, you know, interesting idea for the future. Let's see. Does smart adjustments work with JPEG images? Oh, good question, actually. I don't know. I don't know. If Diego, who's answering questions, does know, then answer, because I'm not entirely sure. Or Matthew, help me out if you're still watching. Are there plans? Kristen was asking for the AI smart adjustments to use other artifacts instead of faces. Well, as I said earlier, this is just version 1, and there's probably all different ways that we could, you know, enhance this. It's just a case of deciding what makes sense, what can we implement, what will give you the most benefit, and everything as well. So, you know, keep in mind this is version 1. There could be all different kinds of ways it could go and improve. But already, now we're saving you significant amounts of time. So please give it a try. Is Capture One 23 available in Ireland? Yes, it's we don't discriminate against the Irish in any way. It's available globally at exactly the same time, within reason, maybe within a few minutes, depending on content delivery. But yes, it's available in Ireland. So there we go. Download Capture One 23. If you don't have it, you can pull a trial down for 30 days from the website. Give it a go. You can run 23 and 22 side by side. That's fine. Just instead of when you download 23, opening your existing catalogs, just make new catalogs for Capture One 23 as a kind of test bed. So do that and then play around with different imagery. If you want to listen to me and some other people again, on Tuesday we have part 2 of a 3-part series we've been doing about Capture One Live. It's a little bit more personal and interactive, so it's not going immediately out live on YouTube, but it does go live to our webinar engine. So if you want to take care or join in that, you'll find the details of that on our learning hub, learn.capture1.com. So it's our Capture One Live experience with our ambassadors Jan Vischerman and Quentin Decaye, photographer and retoucher, working together using Capture One Live to collaborate. So part 1 is already up on YouTube, right on the front page. Part 2 is coming on Tuesday, and part 3 is the week after that. So part 2, we're going to use Capture One to collaborate and pick out the best pictures. And then in part 3, Jan is going to do some editing and talk about how he uses the features in Capture One. Last question from Keith, or D. Keith. How would you suggest applying a smart adjustment to a wedding before importing all the photos? So I would incorporate it into a style. So you could see if you could use a pre-existing smart adjustment, or you could import 5 or 6 pictures, create your smart style, tune that, and then import the rest of the pictures. So that's also an option. For those of you on YouTube, Diego's just put up part 1 of the Capture One Live sequence, and Diego's also put that in the webinar room. If you look in the description of that there and a pinned comment, there's a sign up link to sign up to part 2. So I'd strongly suggest you do that if you're into a great collaborative workflow. Okay, that's enough from me tonight. Download the trial, or if you're a subscriber, download Capture One 23 and start using it and save some time. So thanks for joining. I hope that was useful, and see you all again soon, hopefully on Tuesday. Take care. Bye now.